Next, we have the presentation by Mr. Martin Krajča, a human rights activist, followed by Ms. Camelia Marin. I invite Mr. Krajča to take the floor.
Hello, hello everybody, dear ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure and actually also I'm very much happy to be here today and speak on behalf of our religious society, as it's not very often that we can be here by someone who is interested in our case or situation. And in my presentation, I will explain why it is so. And so we, as a religious society, put some submission for this United Nations UPR Czechia, and it's mainly focused on freedom of religion and belief, tolerance, and protection of religious minorities in Czechia. And as our cases, from our experience and what we found out by examination in practice in Czechia and also abroad, is not only one. And so we represented the case also for the other minorities, religious minorities or individuals in the Czechia. And during our experience, we have some notes for improving effectiveness of a state corrective mechanism in democratic society, which is, as we found out, is very important. So briefly, the content of this presentation will be a little bit focused on how we are acting in the human rights field as a religious body. And then we look on key issues from previous UPR cycles in Czechia, which are connected, our case, possibly. We also look on national framework, which is very specific in Czechia due to some atheistic reasons. And our recommendation, which you can find in your desk and the information for this meeting, will be explanation in more wide context. So I think it will be more clear why we arise such recommendations. So let me introduce a little bit about not only our religious group as such, but I think it's necessary to say that we are international religious society, and our tradition is quite in the field of religion with 1,000 years of tradition. We are quite new. We got 20 years of a tradition. Still is something which is, I think, it's countable, because 20 years long tradition is still tradition when you are living an ordinary life. And we built up the tradition of the teaching and beliefs of our spiritual master, Jaroslav Drobeš, who is named as a Guru Jara. And generally, I will not go for details because we are focusing on different issue, but we putting a lot stress of freedom of an individual and search for meaning of her life. And actually, we are zooming on all spheres of a life of a human, which also brings some consequences for us. We are persecuted here as a group. We are talking about hundreds of people, mostly university educated people, legally innocent. We are persecuted and discriminated since 2010. And the problem arises in our case, it's a longer story, but it's collaboration between anti-cult members in Czechia, between state representatives from the police and the courts, and also with, let's say, participation of the media. I will talk about it later. The issue was that we started in 2010, experienced how hard it is to be discriminated, that we try to somehow find out what shall we do, what should we do in that situation. And because there was no big progress, during the time around 2014, 2015, it was so hard for us that we really start to do something and asking what really can do to improve our legal situation for our minority. So let's say about 10 people devoted to the ideas of freedom of religion and also democratic principles put enormous efforts for all this issue, which we'll be speaking later on. And that's also why I'm sitting here right now today, because during 3 years we put enormous efforts also with supports of international organizations, some brave local organizations which were willing to help us. It's a part of discrimination. And so we are focusing on the freedom of religion and belief and those of conscience as our core principles. So the key issues from previous UPR cycles in Czechia, the basic fact is that not only second cycles, but also in the first one, there was non-recommendation about the issue of freedom of religion and belief or towards religious minorities. When I search the database about the recommendations, I very much appreciate some recommendations which you can see here, which could be or might be very much effective in our cases. However, due to the Czech state doesn't recognize religious minorities as a subgroup of minority, and especially because of the issue of religion, we were not covered by this recommendation, despite accepted and despite, of course, in other areas it somehow is working. For instance, let's see, the first recommendation to combat hate crimes and all forms of discrimination against minorities in accordance with international standard and its human rights obligation, and to bring perpetrators to justice. It would be enough if it would be keep in implementation in practice. Yeah. So I would focus more on a national framework. As I said before, we are strictly atheist. Personally, as a society, I personally doesn't see as a problem for the society, but the problem is when the atheism is starting to be manifested as only one possibility how to perceiving the world, the worldview. And for the freedom of religion, thought and conscience, it's a problem, like in practice. And of course, the protection of rights for this, let's say, theoretically laws and treaties and liberties are granted in convention in our legal system. Yeah, it is grounded. How, for instance, the representatives from the state have a little bit limited understanding to the discourse of religion and especially minor religions. So the behaving towards such problems are really different and not see this, not perceiving this as an issue which they should focus on. So also we got Anti-Discrimination Act, we got OSCE commitments and Minister Council decision combating hate crimes, and also Basel Declaration, which we very much like as well as previous recommendations from United Nations, because they would cover our issues and also issues for other religious groups and minorities. I saw already here as a guest some representatives of them who were also targeted by discrimination and prejudice, as similar as in our case. So we got some recommendation, and I will explain it a little bit because we got limited time. We arise the stop and rectify 7 years of ongoing persecution and discrimination of members of religious group Path of Guru Jara, to all official and unofficial members of our religious group as well, our representative himself. I put there unofficial and unofficial members because during the police raid and do all mess in mass media, when you will reading now media in Czech, you will find very well, not very polite articles about our groups and our leaders. Let's say it's more or less slanders and not very grounded in facts. And this is a big problem because then can discrimination and prejudice and hate crimes and hate speech arise very easily and to enormous amount. And it's hard to defend ourselves or also for other people who would like to defend our situation. It's more or less dangerous and risky. So some people are not recognizing our religious group, despite the fact that, for instance, they like the teaching and for decades they attend the meetings. This is an interesting issue. Of course, we would be like, as I said before, to investigate various hate crimes, which we are pointing at for several years, but nothing really happened. And according to our experience and what we observe in the practice, we recommend to the Czech state that should not acknowledge anti-cult members or the court experts using their discourse as an independent and neutral expert's opinion on religious freedom and freedom issues. Because these kind of people has their own perception and view how we are acting, and they see and more emphasizing the dangers of religion for society. So then it's discussion where is a neutral opinion. I just have some scheme of liquidation of religious minorities by this anti-sect movement, which is very, let's say, not very clearly or it's very gently, actually, because it's not very visible. And we don't have a time, so I will just say there is a monitoring the group, and of course it's labeling as possibly dangerous and manipulative despite the fact there is, or there should be, just the presumption of innocence. But it's not working like this in field of minor religions. And of course, the anti-sect movements collecting testimonies of some people who are not very satisfied with the groups, and the groups within time is labeled as dangerous, and for instance, they can be dangerous for the society. So then it's a cooperation with the police, and the police starting to be looking more in details, and sometimes they find something, and even they don't find something, the fact that the police is investigate someone or the group itself, it's already some kind of discrimination, because it raises suspicions and also lots of fear in family members and friends and in workplaces, and that's there where is arising the discrimination. And when the media put in, then you can destroying campaign against people, like group people or individuals, and it's very much destructible, and it's very powerful, this kind of persecution. And even there is some unproved accusation finally, and this abolition, they said, okay, there was no crime at all. It doesn't help so much, because we're talking about 10 years of investigation, and during that time the whole group is damaged or dissolved. So we are not only one, as I said at the beginning. There are many others who were targeted by anti-cult movements, opinions, Some of them you probably know as they are international one. Some of them are just individuals like Petr Chobot or the Path of Self-Knowledge or Krutinovi, which are here today with us. And some of them were targeted quite recently, as a Petr Chobot, or we are still, or Yoga in Daily Life. They were also slandered by media's accusation, and because it was fueled by hate speech in media, and there is no protection towards religious discourse, it was easily to damage them into the point, for instance, they drop the numbers of participants as we experience it. So, yes, of course. So I will just brief that we also feel the necessity to improve effectiveness of a state control mechanisms protecting human rights, such as Ombudsman or Ministry for Human Rights, in practice, because we try to negotiate with both of these institutions and it doesn't lead to any understanding, not action, but just understanding. I will put also there's a list of institutions which we are negotiated in 2-3 years ago. It was all senators, Senate Committee on Human Rights, 5 ministries, Czechia OSCE delegation, Czechia Ombudsman, also some participation in event, and we were also mentioned in the International Religious Freedom Report in 2015, in 2016, and still we were not here by the Czech representatives. So according to our experience, we really like to have the state which should support feedback from civil societies if the behavior fits the declared international standards and commitments. This is our let's say declaration or pledge for you here today. So thank you for the attention, and we can continue about this in the roundtable after lunch.
Thank you very much for your presentation.